is the ICU. In days, how long were you in the ICU? 4.85 to 5.4. No difference in those. O2 flow max rate, what are you getting? I don't know what that is, probably liters per minute or something like that. And no difference in any of these other variables. So not too exciting there. But we had to dig a little deeper, get down to the bottom table. This is super exciting. Check this out. Discharged home. So the N here, the total number of patients was 411 who received the zinc plus HCQ and azithromycin, or we'll just call it Zithro. And 521 didn't get the zinc. So out of this, 317 or 77.1% were discharged home compared to 68.3% p-value, 0.003. This is a statistically significant finding. So they were discharged, more of them were discharged home. How many of them needed ICU? 9.2% with zinc versus 15.7% without zinc, 0.004. Very significant finding. How many of them needed invasive ventilation? 8% compared to 16.5%. More than twice as many needed invasive ventilation without the zinc, 0.014. A very significant finding. How many expired or went to hospice? Here it was 13.1%. compared to 22.8%, okay? And that's, again, very significant finding, 0.001. Now, this takes just a little bit more to decode. How many expired or hospice, 2 asterisks, this is after excluding all non-ICU patients, okay? So they take all the non-ICU patients and they throw them out. So that means they're actually only looking at ICU patients. So what do we know about zithromycin plus hydroxychloroquine and zinc? We know it works early. So when they say after excluding all 9 ICU patients, this is just, hey, what happens if we are giving these combo drugs to people who are already in the ICU? And the answer is no difference. 73.6% here, 74.4%, 0.93, no difference. But what happens if we exclude all the ICU patients, meaning we're going to just start with a patient cohort which hasn't been in the ICU? How did they perform as a group on zinc or no zinc? And here, check this out. 6.9% expired or went to the hospital in the zinc group crew here, which was an N of 373. It's a pretty big N. You can start to trust these numbers. And compared to no zinc at 13.2%. So that's 0.004. This is a very, very significant finding right here, and it conforms with everything we've been talking about, which is if you can give this to people before they're in the ICU, that's when it's going to do its best work here, and that's what that is. After excluding all ICU patients, look at that. So I'll tell you what, if this is me, and I am me, and I end up getting this thing, I am going to want zinc plus hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin. I would want that treatment. Now, notice here this study was really just comparing zinc to no zinc, and both groups had azithromycin plus hydroxychloroquine. I'm going to wonder if these numbers here aren't significantly better than if we had one more column over here where we could be comparing this to people who didn't have either hydroxychloroquine or azithromycin. It didn't stop the media, though, from coming out and talking about this triple drug combo. This is how this was written up in the Mail online. And it does say it helped COVID-19 patients. But they note here that this treatment regimen did not, however, change the average time patients spent in the hospital, how long they spent on a ventilator, or the total amount of oxygen required. So they're saying, you could sort of read that and go, well, maybe it didn't work. But again, it didn't change it between these two groups right here. It's not, this interpretation is a little off because it sort of implies that it didn't change it for people compared to a control. So that's not the correct conclusion there, but I understand how those mistakes get made. As well, ivermectin works. We talked about this one a while back. I just want to bring this forward because I'm really trying to build a case here for a different standard of care than the one that's been promoted by, say, the CDC, by the WHO, by all those other and all the big pharma companies who want to sell very expensive things. Ivermectin, not a very expensive thing at all. It's basically used as an antiparasitic, and it's a very common drug. It's made cheaply. So this study said, what did they do? Participants, they had hospitalized patients that had been diagnosed with COVID-19, determined by the presence of a positive laboratory finding confirming SARS-CoV-2 infection. They gave ivermectin, 150 micrograms per kilogram, administered once, compared with COVID-19 patients receiving medical therapy without ivermectin. So that's it, a single dose. What was the main outcome? The principal outcome was to assess the association of ivermectin administration with survival in COVID-19. So that was their primary endpoint they were looking at. What did they find? The cohort, including 704 ivermectin treated and 704 controls, was derived from 169 hospitals across 3 continents with COVID-19 illness. The patients were matched for age, sex, race, or ethnicity, comorbidities, and an illness severity score. All right, so they tried to match them up as best they could, make sure that some other confounding factors like age, sex, race, all that stuff wasn't explaining the results they had. Of those requiring mechanical ventilation, fewer patients died in the ivermectin group, 7.3% versus 21.3%. Wow, that's a big difference. And overall death rates were lower with ivermectin, 1.4% versus 8.5%. Very significant findings here. Super duper significant. P value under 0.0001. So here you see that of those requiring mechanical ventilation, they had 21.3%. 21.3% died of those who were actually on got onto a mechanical vent, and not all that different from people who 22.8% in this study right here for people who went into the serious side of things. Not totally comparable, but just trying to see how these things line up. All right, conclusions and relevance. The administration of ivermectin during COVID-19 illness in hospitalized patients is associated with a lower mortality and hospital length of stay. These findings require confirmation in randomized controlled trials. Yeah, and if you had that data more than a month ago and you were in an intact culture, they'd be trying this stuff out right away, and you'd be hearing all about it. I mean, if remdesivir had this sort of a result, stop the presses, you'd be hearing about it. It'd be all over the news and just chirping crickets about this stuff right now, as far as I can tell.